I'm gonna say that I've got a question. I got a lot of questions, but I think that anyone else's question is more important than mine at the moment. So I'm just gonna let everyone else go ahead and ask anything you guys want to ask. All right, it's open now for question. Go ahead.
Gachasilo Pepuma, which means in the Bamileke language, greetings all of you. Really, like, there's no really English translation for that. It's more like I'm sending you all the positive vibes for you to be great. That's pretty much what it is. But that's in a Bamileke language, one of the language called Fefe, or it's also called Nufi. So thanks, brother, for for exposing to us in detail the work that you've been doing. I think it's very encouraging. Now I know there are women probably connected. I'm sure probably mothers. I'm gonna say right away that me being who I am, in ancient Africa, we don't celebrate any Mother's Day. For us, celebration of mother is every day. So sorry for not telling you any kind of like Mother Day celebration, today. For us, it's actually an insult to women to celebrate that day. It's a mindset that we must have every single day. So this is why in Africa, if you really want to fight, just curse at somebody's mother, you're gonna fight. So now, that being said, I would like to jump right away and ask a question to my brother. Now, when it comes to DNA, I think it's one of the most important things that will connect, our brothers and sisters who actually left by force. Some of them are 400, some of them actually more than that ago. And it has been a huge struggle as far as to find out where they're coming from. Now, I'm just going to take an example on you. You were explaining that you actually did yours, and I believe on your mother's side, you were 100% Igbo. Okay, and that's from that DNA test. Now, so my question now is, do you know a little bit about the technology that they use, what database they use to be able to connect you to Igbo? I'm asking this question why? I'm asking the questions because, our ancestor, your ancestor, which are also my ancestor, left, around the 14, we're talking about 14, 15, 16, early 17th century. But, when they were leaving, Africa had empires. Africa had maybe, I would say 6 big empires in the entire continent. So when they were leaving, they were empires, right? But around 1884, which is later in the 19th century, that's where these countries were created. So now I might call myself being a Cameroonian. That's only because it happened in 1884. But before that, I was part of the Congo Empire, which is the Congo we came. So if those ancestors left way before Africa was divided, how come with a DNA test, they can connect those same people to a specific location that's not a country and to a specific tribe? Just to let you know, the Igbo and the Bamileke are the same people. When I went to the Igbo land and I look at the tradition, how they bury the dead, how they perform marriage, how they, what's the celebration when when twins are born, literally everything, even the way they dress. The only difference is that they speak English. Now in Cameroon, on the Cameroon side, the Bamileke land, we mainly speak French. Now, if you go to the part that they speak English, you're gonna see same thing. So since they say you Igbo, what database did they use to identify you as an Igbo but not a Bamileke? Is a Bamileke, which is me, has a different DNA than the Igbo? If yes, where did they get that database? Where did they get that information?
No, it wouldn't necessarily have a different DNA, but specifically, and this has been the claim. So originally, there's something here in America called the Ancestors. There's a bunch of them, but a government sanctioned area called the Ancestors Burial Ground in New York City, in Wall Street area, and that was pretty much where a lot of the enslaved people of African descent were there working and began to build. As the corporate structures were trying to create a building or construct something, as they were digging, they found bones. And again, anthropologically and archaeological studies and research is the genetics. This is how they find out everything from when we go to museums and we're claiming heritage and culture with these different things. It's through the scientific research. Now, for me, I'm not a scientist. The organization African Ancestry states to have the biggest grouping of African genetic DNA. Now, the argument that you make is 100. Like, for me, I totally agree with what you're saying, because there's a lot of migrations, there's, intermarrying, there's a lot of factors in that. But going back to the what's called the African Burial Ground in New York City, it's like a major place where people go and stop and they'll come check it out, and there's a whole restoration thing that they've done. What happened was the scientists that did the research, and they had a whole big ceremony. You can YouTube it, a whole big ceremony where they took the bones, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, some West Africans flew in for that, and they took it to different cities throughout America for a proper burial. It was a huge thing. Once that happened, and this is how Dr. Gina Page tells the story, people began to ask, hey, if you can do that, then why can't you do that on people? And so they, I think, I don't know the specificity of what Dr. Kittles and Dr. Page, who worked, I believe, in marketing, came together to collaborate to do that. And then it started the company. But it's more or less the trust of the, and what I think is like, you get into a car accident, you have a blood transfusion, you put in the wrong blood, you're gonna die. So there's a line that goes, matrilineal, patrilineal, from what they say in regards to, the helix and how that works. Now, I have other theories from information on even why DNA genetics even started. And if you understand the history of Europe in the Dark Ages and what was going on, that's a whole other reason of when they began to try to research the data for the helix and create this whole thing because of a lot of illnesses and sicknesses. It's another story. But now specifically when we get even into Africans, this is what the company states, that genetically the database is what they have. And from what I'm hearing, other companies are trying to get that same information, or they've done a deal. I'm not sure yet. I don't know what the deal is yet. But when it comes to that, she says that it's relatively accurate. There's an argument that says, I know some people who constantly go back and forth to Igbo land, Yoruba land and stuff, that to get further specificity or specific, you go there and you do swabs in these regions and then get the swabs back. And then they say that's more definitive. Now, this is what I was told from another geneticist and another person who practices the tradition of, I'm not sure if she practices Ifa, I'm not sure. But I know she practices one of the African Center spiritual traditions and is back and forth and, stuff like that. And so I have to speak with her because I did want to do what's called a second opinion with 23andMe, but also speak to her. But that's a different thing to get over and then do the swabs. But that's what she said their people do to get more specificity. So I don't disagree with anything you're saying, brother, because again, a lot of migrations, a lot of movement. I do trust the accuracy only because, or the information only because for me, being, around this type of stuff, there are Black anthropologists and archaeologists that are also doing the work. For example, I may interview a brother by the name of Anthony Browder, who is doing excavations in the Kushite temples. And when I show this to my class, when I open my class up, I use this PBS Kushite documentary, and then I show a lecture that I went to at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn, Anthony Browder, and he showed one of the Adinkra Akoma symbol, the heart symbol that was found in one of the Kushite temples in Egypt, which co-signed that the land was lush and there was a lot of migration going on. Something people knew when they're saying that they're seeing ox show up in places like South Africa, different symbols that's supposed to be from one region. But I think it's that, from what I've gathered, that genetic, anthropological, archaeological stuff that now we're doing, I'm kind of entrusting them as I've done, my research on certain things, but it's pretty much you're trusting that science, just like people are trusting, I guess the vaccines and trusting the science for all kind of stuff. It's like I said, it's a Black company. She goes into a whole, because I don't do a whole presentation. She does a whole thing where she shows the trees and she shows the chromosomes and she shows everything. And Dr. Jenna Page can give you can go on YouTube, and when I say like, Sam Jackson's and Steve Harvey and all these people, Chadwick Boseman that played Black Panther and all this stuff, they all kind of done their due diligence and kind of entrust her. And that's why I had her in the film. And again, I'll show 2 minutes of her in the film. So again, I understand what you're saying, and you're right and exact.
Can I just make a comment about that? I actually went through AfricanAncestry.com, Gina Pages, and most of us, I think, that have done that came down to the conclusion that we were Bimaliki. That's how I knew I was Bimaliki. I had done another one, which is Ancestry.com, not African Ancestry, but Ancestry.com, which said I was, and I can't remember exactly, 90% sub-Saharan Africa. Mm-hmm. There's another one, 23andMe, that then also says I'm sub-Saharan Africa with all these other things on my mother's side and my father. Supposedly, not when I say supposedly, I believe this, that Jenna Page and that company has more samples, if you will, from Africa and from others that allows them to more specifically get it down to the country and get it down to the tribe. I assume that means that they've done and taken samples from Africans and from African Americans and others in the diaspora in order to do that. But it's only Ancestry.com, and Louis Gates is one of the key people who's also involved in that, who has a TV program about roots. And so he uses that as well for Africans. So said another way, that's the most definitive research we have on genetics in order to place us within the continent.
Well, so thank you so much. And I just recently saw something of that. They're getting more specific in regards to as they're finding a high percentage of women when they're doing a matrilineal to a specific area, specific regions where we were brought from. And this is more recent research that I'm hearing. She says within the patrilineal, and I don't want to misquote her, there was a lot of raping that went on from white men over here in the Caribbean and on in the Americas. And so patrilineal, she gives a breakdown of why the percentage is a bit less, and she would have to state specifically what that science is, but she talks about there being less percentage, meaning that, okay, matrilineal, you'll be, 90, 95% or whatever, and then patrilineal will be 80 to 90 or something to that effect. Now, I don't want to, again, misquote her. And it's best to research her and what she specifically states about that and geneticists. But then there's a, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, based on migration, based on what has happened to us over here, I think it's very unlikely that you're going to find anybody who's 100% anything.
Exactly.
Based on, so you saying you're 100% Igbo, I'm sure you just, there's no 100% Igbo at this time, going back through the centuries. And when I said I don't even know if it was probably with 23andMe, was saying I was 60%, but they looked at my DNA. I also had some European bloods and others, but of course, everybody in America ought to, because of what happened to us with our women and rape and otherwise. I mean, we have it, so it just makes sense. But I don't think. But I'm happy because I'm here listening to this because it said I was Cameroonian, and that's all I need to know. Bimaliki, I'm good to go. Okay, I got a family now. I'm ready. So I don't need to look any deeper. I got Moncon and the group, so I'm ready to go.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and you have brothers and sisters who might even follow the spiritual system, and they're like, hey, the spirit tells me I'm, and they'll follow E5 or whatever, and that's what that is. And I understand that, and I'm clear on why they feel that way. Doing this testing, and people talk about the eugenics movement. If anybody understands what eugenics is and these genetic things, and even Utah and where Ancestry, the company is, and how and why they're doing what they're doing, and how I think I was at a lecture, someone was saying, hey, doesn't that align with Hitler or something? A white professor out of, I don't know if they were from Scotland or some country in Europe, and at this conference. And I said, well, I don't want to go left with this, but if the country was rooted in everyone being multicultural, and every time there was a Chinese New Year, everyone dressed up for it. Every time there was, Kwanzaa, everyone dressed up for it. Every time there was someone having Hanukkah, everyone dressed up for it. But I said, no, that's not what this is founded on. This is founded on a lot of racial hate and separation. And so I said, what we're just trying to do is find out who and what we are and connect to our, to ourselves, to our brothers and sisters. And so, and again, my father, again, my father gave me what he believed was an African-centered first name. And my mother told me when I was 7, 8 years old, I don't know, she must have saw something on television that she was watching and it pissed her off. All I know is she came to me and I could tell something had bothered her. And she said, look, Nware, I don't care what nobody tells you. The people that you see over there in Africa, those are your cousins. The people that you see in Haiti and Jamaica and, in the Caribbean, those are your cousins. That's exactly how she said it. I don't care what nobody tells you. And so I remember her going on into a rant, and I was like, I was young, but I never forget she kept saying that. And so now being older, I'm assuming something set her off, and, and then she put that. And so I may not even be on that journey had I not been getting that vibration from my parents. And my father was always talking about making sure to connect and stay connected. Now, that's not as much I can say from a lot of, African-American families. Like when I talk to people, I have a lot of brothers and sisters who are Caribbean or African-American, or even from the continent, that they'll say they were lucky enough to have had a professor that told them to read a book, and then it started them on their journey. And that's when you're in racism, white supremacy, and this imperialistic thing, where you're socialized through Hegel and Karl Marx and John Locke's theory of individualism, and these concepts that are in the Western world that frame our thinking that makes us European, whether we know it or not. And we're as African as we want to be, consciously and spiritually, speaking English and practicing these mores, norms, and ethics of Europeans through colonization in the diaspora as African Americans. You know, some people make the debate of us being the more European of the diaspora because of us being so enclosed with these Europeans, but it's that framework of thinking also. And for me, it was through a Babalawo that I would listen to all the time in the Ifa tradition that made me understand. He wasn't saying directly to me, but through learning of traditional ethics and morals and standards throughout West African cultural norms, how white, and it made me start thinking, damn, how white we are in terms of all the things, our reasoning, because the country is founded on these European theorists who created this realm of and if you understand, you know, me having studied all that stuff, it's kind of like there was this crossroad of where Western society was going to go within a communist and socialist and so-called paradigms, all this stuff that went on, and then you know the French Revolution and France, all this stuff. These theorists created the framework for the constitutions and stuff like that in Haiti and Europe and all these kind of things. And it's also the framework of how we're socialized. And it's something that I rarely hear discussed or talked about. And then we can go, and I'm pretty sure people have different theories around that, but that's one of the reasons of our Eurocentrism, from those theories that we've been born into from the womb. And then you get this information from, you know, people from the continent, and you travel, you go there, and you're seeing like, and I'll say a quick story. A friend of mine went to college, me and 3 professors were in one of the offices, and not a friend, she was a student, she was like 20, just went to the continent, came back. And we listened to her talk. She talked for about 20 minutes about how nothing was hers, and everyone put their hands in the same food, and all of this stuff, all this basic communal things, right? And we're just looking at it like, listening like, and smiling like, yeah, that communal element of nothing being yours is part of these traditions that we've lost as you being American, as us being American. That's, you know, when she finished, so, you know. But
well,
can I make a couple of comments if you don't mind?
Yes.
And I really do appreciate all that you've been talking about and the knowledge that you have and the things. It just reminded me that you're 50 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just curious, where did you go to school and at college?
Oh, Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn.
Okay, all right, Brooklyn. And just to give us a different perspective of what Professor was talking about,
mm-hmm.
because it's interesting to me. I'm 73,
mm-hmm.
born in Atlanta, Georgia,
mm-hmm.
at a time of segregation, Jim Crow, and the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the civil rights movement, went to Morehouse College, graduated in 1968,
mm-hmm.
Was privileged to stand over the grave of the casket of Martin Luther King.
Mm-hmm.
A year before or after, Karinga came out with Kwanzaa.
Mm-hmm.
And at a time when we had gone through the civil rights movement, and it's just interesting to me listening
mm-hmm.
to my young brothers
mm-hmm.
now, and the different perspectives of, and I'm going to say this because I got a son who's 43, of our children and what their view is and what we tried to encourage and infuse into them. And you were talking about your mother and your father was saying, you are, let me tell you who you are. And it's so very true that, and that we were trying to impart some things, but you went into a whole different world.
Mhm.
I would imagine you said Malcolm, but I would imagine your education was mainly in a predominantly white environment. Is that true or not?
Mm-mm.
Your formal education when you were in school, or where did you grow up?
Well, I would say a white system, but not a white environment at all. Newark is probably one of the blackest.
Oh, you grew up in Newark?
Yeah, probably one of the blackest cities. But I'll say something real quick.
Yeah.
I'm very understanding of the African communalness of the South and the Caribbean. Very African communal in certain movements and spirit. But there are other elements of ourselves that, when I was talking about the point of being European, that, that become a little different from, and I think for me, having African, Nigerian, Ghanaian, these people talking to, and the discussions we have and friends and traveling and all that, and that's, I think, my conclusion. But Finn, I'm sorry, I cut you off. My apologies.
No, and what I was going to say is, it's great because your parents told you who you were, gave you as much, the blackness, the Africanness, and not familiar or understanding of what you grew up. But here's the point I was trying to make. There's a perspective and there's an education that we grew up with, and it really comes to this point. And I don't know because you've done a lot of research. Henry McNeil Turner, does that name ring a bell with it?
Mm-mm.
Okay, Henry McNeil Turner was a theologian, if you will, preacher. He also, in the United States colored troops, did it. But the point is, in 1898, he wrote a book said that God is a Negro.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in 1898, he wrote the book that said God is a Negro. And the gentleman you were saying was God is Black. I believe, and this is just me, the way I grew up, we did not take on or believe that we were accepting the white man's religion.
Mm-hmm.
We had our own religion. We knew it. We thought it was ridiculous for them to think that we were taking their religion, because when you looked at what their religion caused them to do to us, it could not have been our God. Our God that we brought from Africa, as we know, is a God that thought that there was a sanctity to living things. And so when we got on that ship in 1500, this was not our God. But we had to, in that environment, for survival, act like we were there. But as you know, in the bush arbors, in the dark, we praised and worshiped God. But then when we went out into the world that oppressed us, we had to let them think we were with them until Richard Allen and some other people left. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, we weren't necessarily all tricked into believing that we were accepting the white man's religion. And even though we had the pictures on the wall, we understood that some of us understood that was just the Renaissance painters thinking white. But we also understood, now end with this, that when Christ came in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, there was a reason that God sent him into Egypt, Africa, to hide him from the Romans. There was a reason for that. We also understand that when Stephen, the first martyr of Christianity, was a Syrian from North Africa. We also understood that when in the Bible, when Philip was with Stephen and scattered, the angel of God told him to go into Ethiopia, into Africa. So some of us allowed the white man to play whatever he played, but we understood, when I say some of us, I'm saying we Blacks in this country, the diaspora. And so we did the spirituals, and we didn't pray to their God. We didn't sing to their God. We went from the spirituals to the gospels. We had the blues and then the rhythm of the blues. And then we had, so if you follow that, which is really us and our church, it paints. But I'll tell you what's interesting, and I think it's true, because I feel the same way with my son. Somehow we did not pass on as we could have, and stayed firm to that Kwanzaa about the village. And so you all are now having to rediscover some things that could have been in certain ways, but I tell you, I know why it happened. Because in 1968, when I graduated from college, all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, because of the civil rights movement, we were now allowed to go into places we were never able to go into. And so another migration happened into corporate America, into others. And so this whole integration thing was good for us, but at the same time, it took us away from the village. And so there's something lost in the translation when you come away from the village. And that's why I kind of asked you about, because most of the kids now integrated, even though it could be 70% Black, you're right, the system, what they're taught is not us. And we had to fight for Black studies in colleges in the North. And we got them, but anyway. So I'm just bringing that up to say there's an interesting perspective, an insight that we get depending upon the age and the way we grew up. That's all. But I appreciate all that because you're on the right path.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that, brother. I'm always listening to, for example, when I talk about Dr. Jeffries, and like my mother used to take me to see Mary Baraka when I was a kid, and I used to, all I used to do was screaming and yelling. That's what I thought at the time as a kid. But listening to, like for example, I have what I was going to show is Dr. Malefi Asante. He's the chair of the Africana Studies Department at Temple University. He created the first PhD program. So I have him interviewed for the Our God is Black piece. And he briefly talks about that, but he has a different perspective. And when we said Afrocentric, I was going to show how he created the word Afrocentric, and I'm going to talk about those points in the film. And he often, and he talks about, so I have him for the name thing. So I have him in two different, films, whatever. But him and Dr. Jeffries, and I talked to Dr. Jeffries ad nauseum about this, shared sentiments about what protected us, and the same exact sentiments. So I totally agree with with what you're saying in regards to what was going on, because for example, and I know you know this, if you go certain places, they're gonna put the root on you. And if you know what the root is, we understand that we knew that we were doing certain things regardless of what was happening on the plantation. So, and what was happening, in the churches, and what our understanding was. And I think a professor and a Nigerian professor, because you had so many, like George G.M. James and these scholars from the late 18th century who were debunking so much of this, of exactly what it is that we thought we were doing that we weren't. And basically, I'm saying that to say there was an understanding of, you know, of African culture and being cultural and that thing. So I'm hoping I didn't come off as sounding as if I was saying that anybody in the South, or the elders, didn't have certain understandings, because you wouldn't have like the Walter Rodneys in the Caribbean and these people who, you know, were in the church but were clear on, you know, their practice and religion and culture and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah. So we also, as we see the imagery, we do have a lot of brothers and sisters who follow that imagery and believe that. And imagery is the imagery, as much as some of us, you know that it's not, because I've seen people go at it about that, and they were Black, you know, and they were older and younger, and so that's why we, you know, I think this is a good crucial point to now, diasporically, it's time to start breaking this stuff down. It's time to start having these discussions.
Bringing the truth.
Yeah, because what's on the roof of the Sistine Chapel, watching on Easter, Charlton Heston, you know, has played a major role in, you know, and like the brother that's the preacher at Abyssinia in Harlem, where Adam Clayton Powell was, the preacher now, I'm working on trying Reverend Butts. Trying to get Reverend Butts. I'm working on getting him for the project, you know. So this is, you know,
he's a classmate of mine.
Oh wow! Okay, cool.
So it's good.
Yeah. Reverend Butts.
Tell me you talk to Bill next.
Shoot, I need to. I'm trying to get a cop, because, you know, when Haile Selassie brought the Coptic cross to Great Abyssinia, I want him to talk about that, and not just that, but, you know, what we're talking about and exactly what it is that you were saying, Mr. Nick. For Reverend Butts to give his I couldn't think of his name though. It was escaping me while we were dialoguing, but I could show a quick 2 minutes of the film, but also any questions anybody had. And thank you, Mr. Nix. I you know, really thank you for your for enlightening me with what we were just talking about. But if anybody have any questions, I can also show just a 2 minutes snip of Dr. Page. And all right, let me hop on. I'll show that really quickly. Okay. Go back. Okay, here we go. All right. All right, this thing up. And it should take me a minute or two. I think I'll be a little bit quicker this time. All right. 45. All right. This whole change my name. All right. Okay. So I think we're good. All right, so I'm just going to show, if everybody can hear me, I'm just going to show just a 2 minute, about 2.5 minute clip of the film. Again, that's the title of the film, DNA, Using Genealogy to Change My Slave Last Name. And I didn't speak on in regards to the sensitivity around our names, and I got my family and friends, you know, or I say my family, the elders in the family are 100% behind what I'm doing, because it's a sensitive topic. You know, if you know Auntie Jenkins, Weedy Jenkins, that's what we is, Weedy Jenkins, because Auntie Jenkins says so, and we have that mentality and that attitude, and so I totally understand that. You know, so I don't, disrespect that. I just want to show something real quick, and I'm hoping I can find it. It doesn't take a, okay, that's, right. There's Zariak. Okay. That's the Dunde. I wanted to show, okay. And so here, I'm going to show.
Our families were torn apart. And not really torn apart, they were sold apart. So there's the financial gain.
Mm.
So if you descend from a group of people whose disconnection was the foundation of the most profitable business at the time, how can you expect to know who you are? How can you expect to look in the mirror and see Africa in your face? Mm-hmm. Because everything you're told about Africa is negative. So if you want to hold on to any sense of self-worth and pride, and you believe what you hear, that Africa is poor and there's famine and there's corruption and people are, savages and they don't live in cities. And if you believe what you're told, then why would you want to be like that?
Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's natural. Mm-hmm. And look at what you're told. Mm-hmm. The system tells you this is what you're supposed to believe about who you are.
Wow.
So in a sense that it's almost, this just came to my mind, but it's almost like a defense mechanism. Yeah, keep you sane, right? Because you ought to be crazy if that's what you come from.
Yeah, wow. That's powerful.
So, I don't expect people who haven't been taught to necessarily love what they see, because their entire lives and their parents' lives and their grandparents' lives and their great-grandparents' lives and their parents' lives have been taught that they aren't anything and that what you are isn't valuable. So, and so when you go online, there's an identitytheft.gov that the Federal Trade Commission,
it's not even funny. I'm laughing, but it's not funny.
A government agency has established to help victims of identity theft. So you're a victim of identity theft. If you go to the site and see what does the government say I should do, step 1 is tell them what happened. Step 2 is create a recovery plan. And step 3 is put that plan into action.
So you think I'm part of the recovery
plan? So there's the plan. The plan is laid out. We got to tell people what happened and then help them create a plan. AfricanAncestry.com is part of the plan.
Exactly.
Documentaries are part of the plan. There are lots of components that are part of the plan. And then, so now you have the plan. Then you put it in action. What you going to do with your new knowledge? You're going to change your name. You're going to travel. You're going to invest. You're going to engage in communities that look like you, where you live. There are all sorts of things that you can do to restore your identity.
I like that. That was great.
But people claim the history in order to fortify themselves as they begin to move through history. So we need to take the real history, the true history, and let it purge us of this insanity that we've ingested of trying to think white and be white and act white and believe white. And we need a full immersion into Africanism. We need to Africanize our lives. So Dr. Jeffrey, I'm not African, I'm Jamaican. Well, and when my students say that, most of them are not saying they're from the island of Jamaica. They say they're coming from South Jamaica out there in Queens, where Kennedy Airport is. And my Latino students say, I'm not African, Dr. Jeffrey, I'm from the projects in the Bronx. And so everybody is identifying with the wrong thing and not the real deal.
All right, so I'll just stop it there. I have a dialogue with Senator Parker, who was a professor of African Studies in, I forget what university, but he's now a state senator, and he kind of reiterates the importance of relating to African culture, and he's a Ifa practitioner and stuff like that. And just wanted to show the different faces of culture and not just deal with the name, but just reconnecting on a lot of levels. So yeah, so that's pretty much the piece there. Let me stop sharing. Okay. All right. So that was just a snippet, maybe about 2 minutes. All right. So any other questions or points or interest or anything?
Brother Burge, I just want to thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing the entire documentary, and you're really adding to the knowledge base and just kind of piquing our curiosity to find out who we are. And I like the identity theft, because that's exactly right. It's so pervasive that it's all over. So we need to, as I think you heard on the documentary, we need in every asset of our lives, we need to understand that we're African and where we are. So thank you for this. I appreciate it. I really do.
Hey, thank you so much for just coming in and sticking with it. And I know it's pretty long. I kind of went away from I guess the topic itself, but I just wanted to have dialogue and then kind of put out there what it is that I'm doing. And by next year, I expect to have a completely sellable piece, my first piece, DNA, and then hopefully towards the end of next year, with DNA Part 2 and Black Beaches and Our Guys. So I'm, just constantly, I'm just going to be interviewing this whole summer, and I'm supposed to start a PhD in July. So, I just have to get the paperwork on that. I'm waiting for it this week, when everything will be official. And the dissertation is going to be, I have to decide which film it's going to be. And so that's pretty much what it is I'll be doing, and I'll be letting everybody know, what's happening. And my social media, I'll put in the chat, the Facebook and then the Instagram.
Is your film going to be shown at any other festivals that you know of? Have you put it in for?
No, I haven't put it in because it sort of made its run. I may submit when I do what's called like a complete final edit for sale.
Right. Right.
It's made it's a few good circles and stuff like that, and it's made some headway, which I'm happy for, and I think it's gonna allow me to do some other things with these other projects, just for being able to build that resume. So I'm putting in my my Instagram and my IG.
Okay.
Yeah, brother. So I'm just gonna say thanks again for everything. That's a lot of knowledge and everything. And then I know that I'm not over there, but if you're looking to get some Continental African to help towards the project you're having, Brother Monte is running an organization in the New Jersey area. So you can get in touch with him. He's going to be able to find you some guys to be able to take part to your DNA, I think, Part 2, where you want to get the guys and ask them about food, about things and stuff like that. So he's going to be able to help you. He's actually on the chat there as well.
Okay, cool. Definitely. And you said he's in New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes, so I am actually I lived in Newark for like maybe like a year, and then I moved. Now I'm in Kearney, which is not far from New York.
Okay, quick.
Yeah. Like I say, it's great, man. This is all of this is great because that's what we've been doing. We've been trying to making sure that this reconnection can happen again because I'm one of those, I would say, African or carbonated people that believe and know that it's only until we reconnect all our ancestors that the greatness can come back. So it is something in the Bamileke tradition. We say like this: if somebody in your family dies somewhere, and you don't properly cry that person, the spirit of that person will never leave you alone. Like your family will always have some unfortunate stuff happening until you properly mourn or remember that person through the person body. So it's kind of the same thing. You know, our brothers and sisters have gone so far, I mean, for so long in brewery, and Africa has never really, mourned you yet. Africa has never really tried to bring back the bodies and do the rituals that needs to be done to calm all the angry spirit out there.
I've heard that
you see,
times,
in African tradition, we know this thing. Those who practice the tradition, those who still practice their spirituality understand this. This is why it's also good for us to understand the spiritual system of African, because in there are all our answers. Now, I'm saying to say this again. Don't let a DNA stop you. And I keep saying this. I remember the first time I spoke to you guys when my brother Monkam brought me on this platform, and I said, Africa has never left you. You might be gone physically, but spiritually. Look at how you talk. Look at how you eat. Look at how you dance. All those break dances. Like look at the moon, the moonwalking of Michael Jackson. If I show you a Zauli dance from Ivory Coast, you're gonna be like, whoa, this is Michael Jackson move. It is because it has been always in you. So just like there are so many uncertainty on DNA technology, because again, I'm saying it's a lot of things that just don't make sense. If you see an Igbo man, you're looking at me, you're never gonna see any difference feature-wise. So I don't know how they're able to tell me that we have a different DNA. I'm Bamileke and Igbo. We're literally the same people. So for somebody to say, oh, he's Igbo or he's Bamileke, you're gonna have to show me that we have different DNA. And I don't think that's possible. But the argument is not really there. I just want to point it out because so many people say, oh, they take a lot of money. We're not even sure.
Hey, I'm sorry, brother. I don't mean to cut you off. Are you saying that all Black people from the diaspora are from the Bamileke people? Unless you see DNA? I'm confused.
No. I'm not saying that. From what I'm gathering, it's more or less because it's what it's ironically at the end of the film, Senator Parker, who practices the Ifa tradition, he ties it in with that. It don't matter with DNA. That's exactly what he says. It don't matter any of that. You are connected. And that's what Dr. Cambone in Ghana, and I talked about that earlier, that they don't necessarily subscribe to that. And to get more specific, I'm not subscribing to that either. I'm subscribing to the science to start us off to specifically talk about certain things. When you because I talk about this with the students, especially when you the dance thing. I show all of whatever they think is modern, and I'll go and I'll show the African dances, different thing, and I'm like, this has always been us. But phenotypically, when we get into phenotype, the science of phenotype, that's when you really can clearly see, because of course there's different phenotypes throughout, the diaspora, but all of that is connected. All of that is pretty much, I don't want to say the same or the exact same, but you have migrations, and I think we're mostly all clear on that. And I'm not using just DNA and then saying, hey, this was just kind of like an entry point for, put it like this, I believe I'm speaking to the choir. But if I'm talking to the teacher at the school, at my school, conversation I've had, and they don't have any kind of entry points to any of this, then I'm telling them, hey, think about DNA, think about this thing we're doing and connecting to the continent and that kind of stuff. Because you have people who, for the most part, there's no entry points. And so a lot of times when we're in these circles, if we're in these circles too much with like just our people that understand what we're saying, relating to the other folk, then they're not other folk, they're our families and friends, but they can't come in sort of where in our knowledge base and where we're talking. Not saying that they aren't smart enough and don't have PhDs and aren't intelligent, but again, if you haven't come into certain understandings about history, culture, politics, you know, these type of conversations, you know, again, I'm pretty sure you guys know people. I know some people our age might have degrees and they ain't listening or care about anything that any of us are talking about right now. And I don't know if you guys know people like, but I know quite a few that none of this it doesn't make sense and we're wasting time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Framework.
Yes, just to be clear, you know, I just wanted to make sure, maybe my brother got me wrong. I'm not saying that, all, you know, diaspora is, you know, is come from the Bible. It's actually the other way around. Now, our brother Queenie is saying that they test individuals who remain anonymous, you know, and then these people listed the ethnic group. And when you take a DNA test, you match those people. That shows you share a common ancestry with those tested. So, and then he say, if so, you, Brother Monte, gave your DNA as a reference sample, Brother Monka and Boris, and who are Bamileke from your village, then I take the DNA test, blah, blah. Yeah, no, I get that part, but you're gonna have to prove it to me that my DNA as a Bamileke is different than an Igbo person, though. But what I'm telling you, before 1884, the Igbo and the Bamileke were on the same lane. That's what I'm telling you. So they're gonna have to prove it to me that in less than 100 years, our DNA switch or migrate. I don't know, like, because the border that was there. You see, look at Cameroon, look at Nigeria, look at the Igbo land, look at the Bamileke land. If you remove that border that was placed there by Germany in 1885, we were the same empire. So now, if in 1884, which is the late 19th century, we were the same people, how come in the 20th century now we have different DNA? So those are the questions we're asking. So that's what I'm saying. You know, that it's not there is no exactitude, right? It's like right now.
I'm sorry. Are they saying when we take the DNA test? Are they, as African ancestry, actually saying that they are different people, or are they just saying that the DNA testing that they're getting is actually just saying that the people who call themselves Igbo today, you closely your DNA closely resembles them?
Well, see, this is what we have to get again to the specificity of the specifics of the science, which Dr. Kittle or Dr. Page could speak on. Or genetics, these genetics and geneticists, epigenetics, and all these different terms with the RNA and all this kind of stuff, where there is a science to the exactness of what they're matching. Now, when we start talking about, you know, the exactness, and I think the brother Manef used that.
Monte, yes.
There can't be, and I don't think there can be an exactness, but I know in the DNA that, you know, there has to be some accuracy because this is what's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. So again, when you make the argument that the lines and the borders, that I'm not making that argument because I think we all know that, you know, the Berlin Conference and all of these King Leopold, all that nonsense, right? We all know that. What I think DNA is saying, excuse me, what DNA is saying is what matches closest to these matches versus what's the same and what isn't. You know, that's kind of like.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm saying, and even in their African ancestry and their own statements, they say that we match you with the closest DNA in present day country. So they know that these are just fake borders. I don't think they're saying that you're like 100% Igbo. I know we migrated all over West Africa and all over Africa anyway. I think they're just saying that the people who calls themselves today Igbo people, your DNA matches with those people. I don't think they're trying to tell you 100% Igbo. I think they're just saying that your DNA matches with the people who call themselves Igbo today.
So that means those who call themselves Igbo will have a different DNA than me calling myself Bamileke. That means, so I'm Bamileke, right? So if they take my blood right now and they go in Nigeria, they take any Igbo person, that means their DNA is going to be different than mine. Is that what it means?
Well, I'm also thinking that they're doing this. From what I'm gathering is this: we do practice tribalism a lot, right? So even in my village, they look outside their village for a marriage, but they also looking for people who closely are like connected with the tree line of the Bamileke people. So if you constantly, mixing with your same tree line, of course your DNA is going to eventually say Bamileke, and also with them, something separated that. I think personally, something separated that to make these different realities. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Can I interject something that might help? Because I had the same concerns that you have. There's Francis, and maybe you can just Google it. Francis Collins. Francis COL. Okay, he is the doctor, the scientist that discovered the genome and the DNA. Yeah. Okay, he mapped this whole thing from the National Health Institute.
Yeah, I didn't want to go to that.
Let me just explain something. So, for what I understand, that when we talk about DNA, about 30% of who we are has to do with our genetic base. Another 30% has to do with our social base, and the other has to do environmental. So what that says is that I understand, we have same genetic, but if that African who was totally African at the beginning left and migrated, went into a different environment, which we know, that might change their DNA, because they have to have, when it comes out, they have to, those things impact them as well in the DNA structure. If that makes sense. So everything is just not genetic, it's genetic, social, and environmental. So we all know everybody came out of Africa. The first human came out of Africa. But as they migrated and went, things changed because of that. And I'm thinking that between the Bamileke and the Igbo, because they are similar, the same people, but yet in different environments and different socialization, that maybe that is causing some change enough that scientists can understand that there is a difference somewhere.
That's what the problem is. I don't know if you guys ever been to the Igbo land. You went to the Bamileke land. It's the same thing. I don't know, like it is the same exact thing. Even the feature face, like you cannot make a difference between the Bamileke and the Igbo, even when the way they dress. So I'm just wondering, where are they seeing that difference? I'm just kind of like trying to see like that data. I mean, I guess our brother is going to bring those people who are expert on DNA so they can explain, because I would like to get down to the science of it as well. So,
I think it would be good to go back to what's the young lady who you were talking to on the documentary, who does the African ancestry? Gina Page.
Yeah, Dr.
We need to somehow get to her or somebody else so they can really articulate what their process is to say that they can tell me I'm Bamileke and tell Mona he's Igbo. Right. We need to really know
peace and blessings, everybody. I can actually kind of give a little insight on that, because I'm somebody, I have a million questions. I ask questions for everything. I like to know everything.
Me too.
So actually, brother, I don't want to mispronounce your name. Very intelligent brother.
Monte. Yes, sir.
Monte.
Thank you.
I think what you're speaking on is, and you're correct. Now, when you look at haplogroups, like for an example, first African ancestry, there's two different types of DNA tests that, people in the diaspora can take to find their roots. One is African ancestry, where they test a direct paternal or maternal lineage. They test your Y chromosome and they test your mitochondrial DNA, which from your mom line. Now, the other type of test is called autosomal, where they do your overall DNA test and you can find DNA cousins. But I just say that as a background. But what you're speaking on is haplogroups. For example, my paternal haplogroup, if I remember correctly, is EP252. And the haplogroup is a subgroup of EV8. And from my understanding, these haplogroups cover a wide range of populations. And I know people who are Igbo, and their haplogroup is the same as my haplogroup. Like Igbo people who are from Nigeria, born and raised, never been outside of Nigeria, their haplogroup was the same as mine. Now, my paternal lineage goes back to Bamileke. So with that, we see what you're saying. So like I've seen just through DNA testing, what you said is absolutely correct. So what African ancestry does is they test a certain part of your DNA. So now, of course, I'm not a geneticist, so I can't really break it down, very elaborate. But from my understanding is the way they determine, what population you said and you share ancestry with is they'll take, like, for example, they gather a lot of samples from Bamileke people, Tikar people, and then people who are Igbo, and they test certain parts of your DNA. But Dr. Rick Kittles would be able to explain it better than me. So that's how they able to look at me and look at my DNA and show that I share DNA ancestry with Bamileke people. And then of course, when they test, I guess, a different part of your DNA and they find my haplogroup, that's when you find a wider range. But like the elder said, we would have to get a geneticist that can really break it down. But what you said is actually really on point. So there is a connection that connects all of us, because I think even they said the subgroup that my haplogroup is from goes back to Egypt. They said that my haplogroup is a subgroup of EV8, and that traces back. That's the same haplogroup they said is Ramses I think second or third, I can't remember. But he shares the same haplogroup as me and other people that have my haplogroup. So of course that covers all kinds of different tribes and ethnicities. So you're absolutely right with that. But a geneticist will be able to break it down from the big collective populations that they're speaking about, and from the part of the DNA that they look at to determine more closer ethnic groups.
Yeah, thank you so much, brother. And even when I first came out, I talked about Dr. Kittles and the autosomal, the matrilineal, or patrilineal. I didn't want to get into the if you're familiar with Francis Crick and the Crick papers, and then into that, the numbers and haplogroups. That's what I always leave Dr. Page, because she does a presentation on that and then shows you specifically how that breaks down and how that translates. Okay. Even still, when you get into the social part, because I left out Dr. Jeffrey's part, where he also said specifically what Brother Nick said, and how you're socialized and how that affects the genetics. That's earlier. That sort of opens up the film with his part. And I'm still kind of the latter part. So Brother Nick's right on point with it. But exactly, once you get into the haplogroups and how it gets back to Egypt, like, because you're talking about migrations throughout the whole continent. And so now we're getting into, specifically scientific talk and rhetoric. I always stay away from that, because I would, and when I did my reveal at King University, where I teach at, I had Dr. Page. She did the presentation, and then she got into the specificity of what all of that specifically means. So so I appreciate you adding that specifically with the haplogroups, because that is that brother is right and exact, and then can get and then as a person out your personal self of research, you can kind of go in the national health with NHI and get more information. And in part two, again, I'm going to let the scientists speak. I'll have hopefully Dr. Page in part two, as well as NHI, who I've been in contact with so many times, but it's tough because of COVID. And since Dr. Page has those presentation forms, I'm going to speak with her in regards to, her speaking more to it. But thank you so much. The brother that just spoke. I don't know if he hopped off, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know
you're welcome. Yeah, so I think the spiritual connection to me, I think it's a much more important on this, because I just wanted to point out to a country like Cameroon today. Cameroon was visually attacked by the French, and all the way back to 1972, not too far long ago, we were still fighting against them. And when we were fighting against them from literally 1952 all the way to 1972, this vicious war, a lot of migration had happened. Now, Cameroon has today almost 262 tribes today, speaking different languages. Now, I want those people to come and show me how those different tribes have different DNA. I really want to see it, because all these things happened recently. We were literally kept running away. We literally kept running and forming these different villages. So now that context is very important to look at, because there's a dynamic here that happened. This is why when you go from one tribe to another one, I can literally understand almost 5 of them, because that's how close they are. So if somebody now is going to tell me that we have different DNA, I really want to look at the science of this. Now, because I know some people are confused, and because of the confusion as far as where they come from, their roots, they don't want to connect to Africa. And I tell them, you don't have to be confirming that that's in your blood. All you have to do, identify with one kind of spiritual system, and you can attach to you, because that's who you are. Whether you go in the Manding Empire, now the Mandingo people, from the Sunjata Keita people, all the way back to the 11th century, you go today in the Mandingo Empire, they have almost 50 tribes, going from the Bamana, going from the Soninke people, the Malinke people. All those people, if you go back then, you didn't have that many tribes like that. So, but they have one spiritual system. They call that Komo. So if you attach to that, that's it. You connect to the continent, because that debate really, me personally, I speak on that because I know so many here in the diaspora, whether it's here or in France, because French also has some island called Martinique and Guadeloupe. Yep. So many of them also are trying to connect, but here's the problem that they have. They cannot find a proper way to connect through DNA, because the science is just, I say, listen, you don't have to wait for that. You can literally connect to that without even waiting, because spiritually, you are way more connected to you are way more connected to that spiritually than any math, because spirit has no time and space. You could be there anytime, right? So that's why I also wanted to bring that part, that aspect on the table, because it's as important as a DNA test.
Yes, and to add to that, spiritual, and that's what Senator Parker closes out the documentary with that you don't need to do that, and because of his also roots in the EFI system, that's what he's talking about. And so, but also what you're talking about too is sociology, psychology, spirituality, which is different from science. There are certain things that socially, when you get into wars and migrations and these different things socially that are going to happen in regards to changes. And then when you get into the names of groups of people, that's when it gets into a mishmash and things get interchanged. And so I understand the argument that you're making in regards to the DNA, because people make the argument about names. African names and European names, totally different systems.
Yep.
They didn't even have last names. If you know, we know the history of Europe. You were a small or a smith based off of what you did or what you look like. And in the 14th, 13th century, in certain parts of Europe, again, there weren't any last names or surnames. That didn't come until far later, and then they projected that onto us with that Western system, because as we know, indigenous Native American systems and African systems are totally different in regards to the name. You know, you get into Ashanti or Ghana or whatever, and you know, Kwabena and Kofi and you know, Kamau and these different names, and born on a Wednesday and Friday, et cetera, and Afua and stuff like that. And so, you know, so that's where it kind of gets interchanged with the social aspect. So, but the DNA in regards to what the brother was saying, and sort of what I left out in regards to the haplogroups, and then these actual specific numbers, then tells you, for example, when I was in London, when I mentioned this, the Society of Genealogists, and I spoke with a professor in Leicester, Western London, I believe, in not Brixton. I can't think of the town where the university is, but he talked about the Burges, my last name, being in a certain region, and then of course Burges moving and other Burges, and so you know that's when you get the social part and the social aspects, and you can't specifically have a name connected to the blood per se, because it can change through marriage, and you know there's again. This thing is interchangeable. When you get into the numbers and the haplogroups, but what the brother was mentioning, and you know, phenotypes into the science, there is a specificity that is accurate in that, because you're not gonna be able to, you know, a great-great-grandmother, and then they've done these digs and these archaeological stuff to find out certain things based off of that science. So again, I'm not debating the migration patterns and the movements and the wars and stuff like that, because everyone's kind of interconnected. But now when you get into the specifics of that specific science and data of who people are, there is some things there, because these are the things that they use to give us proof that you know, this all of that history that we talk about with Sheikh Ata and Dr. Ben, a lot of that comes out of scientists and archaeologists doing this research, with the carbon dating and all of that stuff that goes into that gives us concrete, because spiritually we know we're connected. We already understand that, and anybody who's seen pictures of been to Kemet, when you see the phenotypes of some of those kings and queens, they look, it's, you know, Raheem and Shaniqua from down the street, that's a king and a queen. You're clearly seeing that. There's nothing to debate about that. So, you know, so socially and spiritually, we are connected to the continent. What I'm only bringing out is something that, you know, people can, you know, kind of use to like give you that real understanding of, look, we are connected to the continent, because through that science, people are socially and spiritually saying that we are not connected to Africa. This is what they're saying. We have nothing to do with that. Some will say that we were already been here, and so and if you do a science, it'll just connect us here, which then why is the science more recently, when we talk about, and I didn't have that study with me, a more recent study of all the women, there are a lot of women that they've done, and saying 80% are coming from this region, specifically of West Africa, that are located in Brazil and the Americas and stuff like that. And that's based on the science to be able to even prove that. And so again, I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong. But what I am saying is the science can help us with certain aspects of connecting us for those who are saying that we are not African. You know, there are people that are saying that, and the science disproves that we are, although we've already known socially and spiritually.
Yeah, those people who are saying that, yeah, as you said at the beginning, it's because Africa is not winning now. Wait until Africa wins. They're going to be running away. Oh, I'm African. You know what I mean? We know what's going on.
Well, that's the point I made when actually this was 2 years before Black Panther came out, but having followed it for so long, I said because it's not lit, or you know, if and I say this all the time. Right now, when we talk about Mansa Musa and what he did, and the way I describe Mansa Musa to my students is, I'll say that imagine you know, 1,000 Bentleys and Ferraris and these top tier helicopters that's $100,000 flying in a line from city to city, and whoever, the Jay-Z, Beyonce, Floyd Mayweather, whoever it is, these groups of people are passing, giving like millions of dollars or $1 billion in Chicago, and then they go to LA with all the news following them, then they go to Houston, and then they go to Miami, and then they go to LA, you know, trying to get them to understand what Mansa Musa did from a practical standpoint. And so to try to get them to connect to that regalness and royalty, socially, you've been disconnected, and you're gonna, you know, because what Dr. Page says in the film, you know, African booty scratcher and all of these other, you know, nonsensical things that we've done socially to push away, and not that we've done, how we've been brainwashed with, you know, from Charlton Heston that I talked about earlier, when we watch certain things, and, you know, everything that we understand, because I'm speaking to the choir, that has disconnected us. You have those who have watched Eight Is Enough, Brady Bunch, and Friends, and all these things, and they want to relate to that. They want to you know, have a Chihuahua and, you know, a mink and a Mercedes, and if that is Africa right now, if they're giving literally that 40 acres and a mule, right? If governments right now said that you get, you know, $250,000, this plot of land, you have to take your DNA, the exodus will be like the Great Migration. And it wouldn't be that. It would be, oh, people would get to claiming it as soon as they can. If that was a reality of, even though we know that there's wealth there, if they knew that they could go grab that, and there's all these presidents that are offering that, everybody Black is African, and they are throwing their dashikis on tonight. if that was to, you know, sort of like when Nana Adolfo and the brother Diallo Sumbri, they run the Adinkra group when they created the Year of Return and whatever. Now imagine if that Year of Return came with some financial returns, like actual, they're going to forward the money right into your account, 250. Let's have it. Everybody's African. So, you know, and it's a social and spiritual thing.
Yes. Yeah, it's very, I always try not to, if somebody still want to deny, I say, well, you know, there's something to deny who you are, but you're never gonna stop your shadow to follow you. I mean, you know, you can say whatever you want to say, but your shadow will always follow you. When that sun hits on you and then that shadow is on the floor, there's no way you can detach to it. So whether they want to run away from it, it's gonna be, they're gonna remain who they are internally, you know. Yeah, man, this is great work. Like, listen, you are in the same era than me. We can always connect and see how we can bring this awareness more of, you know, to the people out there, to be conscious. I've had discussion with a lot of the group of people here who claim to be Aboriginal from here and who have nothing to do with Africa. And I shut them down when I took them for the first time. I don't know if you go to Long Island. There is a power festival over there. It's the Indian tribe. Yes, I go there every year. It's just COVID stopped me last year, but every year I go there, I got pictures. And I brought those 3 people there who claim to be Native American. I brought them there. Now, they claim to be Native American, but they know nothing about any Native American ritual, but they claim to be that. I say, listen, since you say you're not African, okay, come with me to one of the events. So we went there. This is back in 2017. So we went there. And as soon as we got there, I called one of the son of one of the chief there. He's my friend. And I asked him, why are you wearing the feather that you wear in your head? What is the signification? Why are you wearing that? Now, when this guy gave us the explanation, which I was recording it, right? Like on my phone, like no video, but only audio. He said, the explanation he gave is exactly what the Bassa people in Cameroon do. Now, we have a tribe in Cameroon called the Bassa, B-A-S-S-A. They are also very spiritual and traditional in Cameroon. The same explanation he gave is the same thing that the Bassa people do. And I've already explained to those 3 guys. They were all shocked. I said, no, it's not finished. We went again ahead. And then as those guys were beating the drum, I asked the question, when you beat the drum, under what rhythm are you going through? He's saying that as they beat the drum, they have to make sure they keep going first to the heartbeat rhythm. That's the first thing. And I asked him, why when you dance, why you take your shoes off, why you have to dance barefoot? The explanation is gave is the same exact thing that the Bamileke do when we dance. And I asked him again, when you dance, why you always dance counterclockwise? Why you never go clockwise? Why you always go counterclockwise? And remember when you dance, when they always dance in a circle. It's the same exact thing we do in Africa. So I asked those guys again, are you different? Are you different now than an African? When you look in the tradition, they all shut their mouth. You see, a lot of them speak out of ignorance, and sometimes you got to show them because a lot of them don't even practice no African tradition. They don't know what it is. So they just speak because they want to disconnect from Africa, right? Because again, it's no winning. But the reality is that those so-called Native American, they are not others than African who immigrate here long time ago. Right, when they left Africa, as Sheikh Antajab has proven it, But again, because we were called slaves, at some point, and now that name they don't want to attach to that because they called slave, and I keep telling them, you were not slave, you were the best, and that's what I think I told you when we started talking. They took the best from us, the best engineers, the best doctors, the best everything, the best, the strongest physically. That's what they took. And they came here, they made you into something that was less than an animal. But that doesn't mean you were a slave. You were no slave in the continent. So, but they just want to remain with that name that they've been given here. And that's what fuels them to refuse to accept that, yes, you might be indigenous from here, but remember that your beginning point was on the motherland, and whether you want it or not, it's your shadow. It is pretty much your shadow. So, and that's why what I do, me personally, I go in the tradition. I think that's where the answer is. In the original spirituality and tradition. That's where we're going to see that we all one. And I've been proving this for 7 years now. I went to the Dogon, I went to Mali, I visited the Dogon people, the Bamana people. I went to the Igbo land. I went to how do you call these people? The Wadabi people. I don't know if you know about the Wadabi.
Yes.
Yes. We have them in Cameroon. We have them. They're in Cameroon. They are in Senegal. They are in Niger. They're very nomad people. They move a lot. They're the same family as the Maasai people. Yeah. So when I go in the traditions and I look at what we do traditionally before the white men arrive, I say, why are we different? Why are we fighting? Because the main core thing that we do when somebody dies, when we get married, when a twin is born, some of those main rituals when a baby is born, all those things are similar. It's pretty much the same thing. We might use different herbs, we might use different deities, but the meaning, the intention beyond it is the same thing, which is actually enhancing the power of our spirit. All African tradition will tell you that we know the human body is 80% spirit and 20% flesh, just like water. That's why we care more about the spirit than the flesh, because the spirit is everlasting. All African tradition do that. All of them, whether it's here in America, what you call ancient indigenous tribes here, they do the same thing, because I visit them every year. Whether it's in Brazil, the indigenous people in Brazil, whether it's in South America, same thing. They operate in the same thing to the spiritual part, where they're always trying to connect spiritually and not really care much about the physical part, because they know the spiritual part is everlasting.
Yeah, so, brothers, can I make a couple of comments on that? Because I appreciate what I'm hearing, and I tell you, you're absolutely right. There's a statement Martin Luther King always used that said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards truth." And what we're talking about here is talking about the truth of what our journey has been from Africa to here. We're talking about the truth. And part of what the problem is and looked into, it's called the Kruger-Dunning effect, meaning simply we've been hoodwinked. They've continued to say the same thing over and over and over again, so much so that we start believing it. And it's not just us, it's the whole world. So now, because of technology and history, and we've broken loose in 68 and freed ourselves in our minds, that now these things are coming out. So now we have technology that allows us to hear brothers from on the continent, talking to brothers from the diaspora, and we're comparing notes, and we're saying that absolutely we are African. And so I did a lecture 3 weeks ago, and it's interesting, Monte, because you just mentioned, and it's called Divine Connection, the spiritual, rhythmic, and hidden history of freedom's call. And it starts in Africa, and it's something you said we first met. About 70% of our body is water. And you started talking about African spirituality. And I started looking into that. So I've incorporated that into my lecture. And so I'm taking them from African spirituality all the way up until today. And
our brother must have felt something must have happened. Well, and what I wanted to say, I don't know along the lines where he was going. I was going to talk about the black church, and a lot of the even in the Baptist church, black church, you'll see dances. And I had a conversation with a sister before, and a lot of our people will tend to call anything Black African, pagan and all that kind of stuff. That's the norm. Yeah. And you're speaking on dead ears. But I talked to her about the Schomburg Institute for Research in Harlem, and how there was a whole presentation in the Schomburg Institute dedicated to show the retention, because there had been a debate over the retention of African systems that are practiced. So you had, white sociologists and white people and Black people too, saying that we ain't got nothing to do with Africa. We totally different people, stuff like that, written, documented, primary documents, stuff like that. But in the Schomburg, it showed you and talked specifically about what the retention is. And you can see it. Any of those so-called Holy Ghost dances that you see in the church, just like we talked about earlier, you will see, if you can pull up a video of certain Congolese ritual dances, the 2-foot shuffle, when they do the 2-foot shuffle and jump in and whatever, right? It's a certain thing, and that's the retention. But if you say anything that has anything, and that's not, that's not Jesus, then they don't, everything begins to shut down and not understanding of what that retention is. And, and I think, again, speaking to the choir, and there might be different understandings of that, but you will see, you go to any Black church, you will see the African spirituality retention culturally and or socially being played within the church. It's just being trained that the systems are pagan or the devil is a whole different thing. And that's what me and the sister was saying. Mr. Nix,
I'm sorry. Yeah. Let me be, something happened, I went off, but can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you now, yeah.
Okay. Well, the point I was making about we've all been hoodwinked, if you will, over the years, over the centuries. But now we're at a point where, because of technology, we're able to clarify and bring truth to light and truth to power and educate ourselves on it. And what I was saying about this lecture idea gave, it really talks about how we went from Africa all the way up actually to right now, spiritually and rhythmically. And you were talking about the drum beat and the beat of the heart. And I bring that out, but also the point of the fact that this is a divine connection, meaning God has been a part of this thing and our journey here. And I've connected, and you mentioned this, the call and response of Africa, the ring dance of Africa, the stepping and the dancing of Africa is what we do over here. I mean, it is in our, quote, DNA. And so our churches, our spirituality, our dance, our rhythms, our songs are all from African base. So my point that I'm getting is, we're just ignorant in some situations of knowing that this is African. In the college campuses, we have stepping. Stepping is clearly from Africa, okay? And so that was brought out from the college campus. But now we know that there's an African origin to stepping. Now we know there's an African origin to it. And you mentioned it again, the raspiness of our voice, the fact of that we move all our bodies in a rhythmic. In our churches, we're spiritual and we move, because in Africa, you move, you dance, you do everything. So what all of us are trying to do now is educate the masses and saying, absolutely. And as I think I said before, because somebody was talking about, are we African-American, are we Black? And I was saying, we had to come out with Black power in the 60s in order to negate the thought that Black was not beautiful. And if you notice in the 60s, we came out and we said, Black is beautiful. Black is beautiful. That was part of what we were doing as a people, to remind ourselves, no, you've been taught this, Black is ugly, Black. No, Black is beautiful. Black is power. Black is, we had to do that in order to get ourselves ready for the 21st century. We had to build ourselves up because we were about to go out into the world. We're about to migrate. And it's interesting, but that came because we went from spirituals that took us through the civil war to emancipation. And then we had a ministry for 10 years called Reconstruction. And then we went into what they call Black codes, the same thing as slavery, but as oppressive laws. And then we started singing the blues. We did the blues, but we were still in the church. So we took the blues of the church, we took the spirituals, and we took the hymns, and we created something called gospels. And gospels took us from the late 19th century into it, all the way up through Jim Crow, through segregation. Everything was coming out of the church. That was our power base, because God was our power base. And so we sang to God to release us. So it was the Gospels that got us there. And then all of a sudden, what happened in the 40s, and the Gospels continued, but then all of a sudden we started measuring the rhythm and the blues, R&B. We came out of the B, we came out of the blues, but then we met, because during the Harlem Renaissance and stuff, our rhythms, we were working this thing. We were working this thing. And also out of this was jazz. Jazz came. Now, what you have to understand is every one of those had to do with our people improvising where we were. So we came out of Africa, we got us on this land, we started praying back to God. And in my lecture, I said, when we got on that boat at the boat, we had what was called a West African sorrow chant. And they heard the chant, we were chanting. Once we got online, we got into the spiritual. We started calling God, swing down, all our spirituals. We never wrote anything down. But it wasn't until 1867, they used to call them slave songs. We were calling to God to come down and free us from this thing. 1867, finally, and somebody mentioned it, when they did the Emancipation Proclamation, they sent 2 white guys from Harvard down to the Gullah people in South Carolina to listen to what they were saying. And they wrote for the first time down in musical score our songs, and they published it. Other than that, guys, for 250 years, we were call and response. Africans, our churches do it today. So I'm excited, as you can see, because I'm telling people this isn't happenstance. And improvising the music, improvisation is what we did at every step. So then we went into the jazz, and they picked up on jazz, which is the only American thing, because what does it mean? It lets everybody go off and do their thing, but then we come back together. So it's a beautiful story that we're all telling right now.
Yeah, when you get into the truth. Yeah, adding to the, when Marcellus will say Congo Square, New Orleans, and talking about some of these Congo squares, as we say, throughout America and stuff that begin to happen. And it's funny when the thing happened with the computer, I talked about what becomes the issue is, and what we're talking about is the naysayers, right? That aren't here to defend whatever that is. And I was telling him about a naysayer, grew up in a Baptist church, and everything African is pagan and the devil, what we hear all the time. And then I began to have to talk, because that's where the debate and the arguments will come in regards to the rejection, because of not understanding what the African retention is. And I talked about, this is what I was just saying a second ago, about when in the Schomburg Institute in Harlem, and this is what I said to the sister. I said, people have often debated that. I said, white folk, everybody said we weren't African and we lost all of that. And then I was saying in the Schomburg, they had a presentation of showing you specifically all the retention. Even, and I mentioned to the brother, the Congolese 2-foot shuffle, Holy Ghost dance that you constantly see in the Baptist church. You see, and you will see all of these dances and all these African spiritual ritualistic things. But what happens is, if you don't say Jesus, it's the devil. And you will talk about, you will have back and forth with Black people who, because of that part, they are trained. And these are our people here. You're Caribbean, when we talk about Obia and Jamaica and go into all of that, but it's a rejection. But then there's also a rejection, and then this thing on the side. When I said earlier about the root, where you have preachers still going to, these people who understood the African spiritual connection, who understood that when we talk about specifically the ritual work that goes on, and how it's not, as some people will reject it and say, that's the devil and this and that, at the same time, your preacher could be dealing with that and understanding its power and its value.
Yes. So
your imam,
what I'm trying to do, but what I'm trying to do is encourage you all and encourage everybody. Don't get hung up on what they may or may not. Just educate. It's like Karinga said, don't hate, educate. And that's what we're trying to do. So
exactly.
Be encouraged. Be encouraged. That's what, and don't get down on that. Just keep, just like the Cougar done, and just keep telling the truth. And God's truth will not go away. So I'm trying to be encouraging to you.
My brothers, if I could just say one thing before I go and eat. I've been fasting today for Ramadan. What the brothers spoke about earlier about the spiritual aspect of really finding out who we are as Africans, aside from like the DNA testing, where we can find out insights to that, I believe that the more that we communicate with our brothers and sisters, from Africa, and we learn more about African culture, we'll be able to identify, these places that we have a connection to, as like you all gave plenty of examples of that. When you look at things that we do over here, and then when you learn what happens in Africa, you see the connection. And then when you take it deeper and you learn about some of the personalities of the people, and you can match it with your family, because the same way DNA passes on, spiritual DNA passes on certain characteristics, certain mannerisms, certain traditions. These things pass on as well. Like for an example, my family, we ain't know anything about where we came from before I took the DNA test, but my grandmother used to call me Meme. That was the name. She always called me Meme. She never called me anything else. And then when I started learning Fefe, I learned that means brother.
Yep.
And we trace our roots to Bamileke. So, maybe if I just would have learned Fefe, I probably wouldn't have to pay money for the DNA test. I don't know. But I say all that to say that even if you don't take a DNA test, we're so mixed up that pretty much anywhere in Africa that you feel a connection with, you probably have some kind of ancestry there, because none of us in the diaspora are going to be 100% from just one tribe. I'm pretty sure we're a big kind of pot of gumbo of all of it. So, I believe that spiritually, where you belong will claim you. I believe that, the more you connect with Africa, you'll find yourself meeting people from a certain ethnic group, meeting people from a certain tribe and getting along with them. And if you did take a DNA test, you'll probably find out that that's where you're from. But I think that if you just really just connect with that African part of our souls and our DNA, just connect with the culture, home is going to find you. And I really appreciate this conversation, and God bless everyone.
All right, brother. And I'm going to say, even linguistically, when they do all this ebonics and all that kind of stuff, they talked about exactly what you were saying with the Fefe and the Man and how it all, that's just, all of who we are and who we've been. And so you're exactly right. And again, that's what brother Senator Parker says towards the end. The brother, he's a Babala, and begins to talk about none of that matters in regards to the DNA, genetic stuff like that. Spiritually, you're automatically connected. It's in your blood. You already know that. So so definitely, brother, definitely.
I mean, just so I mean, when I look at the connection I have with Brother Toko in the call over here, I mean, when Brother Toko first started speaking to me, even if he didn't probably had a DNA, and I met him through maybe something else, I was going to tell him that, you look like a Bamileke. After speaking to him, I kind of found out more that thing he was doing. It was linked to what our people do back home. Even if probably imagine that maybe I met him maybe in the university campus, I was gonna stop there and say that, you look like somebody I know, and then that's how you see that the DNA is always there.
It's always there. Genetically, I'll give a shout out real quick to Odessa and Omawale, two of my peoples that popped on. Odessa, she's out of Brooklyn, and I know her from Brooklyn College. And Reginald Wale, we linked up through the brother at Transatlantic Productions, and so they popped in recently. So just giving them a shout out real quick.
You know, I want to double down on what Brother Malcolm said. When we first connected, my career was like loosely based on what our culture is. And I've noticed when I talk to a lot of people who are Bamileke, they tend to be like writers and professors, you know, principals, and just different. It seemed like we all tend to have the same type of career and lifestyles, even here in America. You know, it's really crazy.
Yes, sir. Yes, it's spirit don't lie, man. Spirit don't lie. Spirit is. I'm telling you, it's so deep. It's so deep to the point where once you get in that spirituality consciousness, as our brother professor was saying, man, those same people who claim that we do evil, when we kill people deep in the jungle, they're the one to come. They come at night because they don't want nobody to see them, right? They come at night when they have that back problem that no one was able to cure. They come to us, you know, in the jungle, but we do what we got to do. And then when they go, they cure. They're not gonna tell everybody that they came to see a shaman in the jungle. We did some kind of incantation of some spirit to cure them. They're not gonna say that, you know. But it is what it is. At the end of the day, we know that in that initial spirituality that we've always prevailed. All right, I'll put it something to you right now. Do you know how they always say that the ancient Egyptians, you know, now they cannot deny that they were black, but now since they cannot deny that they were black, they have to say that no, ancient alien helped them build it.
Right.
They must have some kind of connection with some ancient alien because they don't want to put that knowledge.
It can never be us by ourselves. It has to be something. We have to always have help.
Yeah, so something came from Pluto, and Pluto with
but again, they cannot prove it. It's some kind of fairy tale because they want to remove our ability to be a smart people, right? But let me tell you something, brother. If you want to research what we've done, how our ancestors did what they did in Egypt, don't look at conventional science. It's mysticism. I don't know if you guys follow me. This is high mysticism. I don't know if that's actually an English word. It is the science of the insane. It is the science that's done. You have to transcend your spirit. Now, one of the king of a village was interviewed in France. His name is Sokojo. He has is a king in one of the oldest king in Africa right now. He has 66 years of ruling. He's 85 years old right now. No, maybe 86 years old. Now, this king was invited in France by his people. So when he got at the airport in Paris, there were so many people at Roissy Charles de Gaulle in Paris that journalists asked him, why are you mobilizing so many people to receive you? You're just a king in Africa. You mobilizing more people than the president? He said to the journalist, you guys spend 5 years, sometimes 6 years to build a rocket ship to go to the moon. Me, I'll go there in 4 seconds. That's what he told them. So, and they thought he was playing. He said, well, if you won't believe me or you don't believe me, that's up to you. But I'm telling you, that's what I do, right? So it is until we reconnect to that spiritual consciousness where in a spiritual realm, you can literally live anything you want. You know, you can literally be anywhere you want. I can sleep right now today in my bed at night and I'm in China. Obviously not physically, but spiritually, I'm going to be there and I will do whatever I need to do there and come back to my body. This is a science that's called, now they call it today quantum physics, right? They're studying that, they're realizing that the matter can be anywhere at the same time. Einstein did everything he didn't understand. While he was dying, he said, I hope you guys you figure this thing out. The number one thing that they're studying today in science is the black hole. What is the black hole? So this is a science that we have mastered. So the key is in us, and we just have to get conscious and reconnect again with that kind of science. This is what our ancestors had in Egypt. And that's why they were able to lift a 5 tons of rock from the ground to 100 meters up there with a precision in a nanometer with no claim. How do you think they did that? it's our highest, it's a very mystical science. It has nothing to do with writing in the paper. You don't write this science in the paper. We don't write it. I'm telling you these things because it's the same science we use to cure people. People that have come to us with disease that, you know, they've spent millions in England. Rich people, they went in England, whatever. They come in a village. We speak to a tree. We speak to a leaf. You see, because we connect to that leaf in a spiritual way, which is really not. You can't write that science. So.
Yeah. Well, that's why you have to label it and call it.
Preach, brother.
You have to call it witchcraft in order to steer everybody away from it in order to be able to make money off of pharmaceuticals, which is another conversation. Yeah. But when you deal with the elements of, for example, what was killing the slave masters, the concoctions or whatever they were doing, you know, on the continent, using these concoctions, giving them to these imperialists, and then they would be dying, you know. This is the quote unquote part of the witchcraft because they understood toxicology. You know, you hear this all the time. They understood the spirituality in the herbs and all of this kind of stuff. And so you're trying to explain this to like my family members and whatever. When we have these discussions, like the witchcraft quote unquote is a science of understanding who we are spiritually. That's what you're calling the witchcraft.
Exactly.
Thank you for saying that. If you don't just, you know, and it's tough because I don't like argue or come at them or say or get pissed off and all that. But I tell them just look at the information. I'm like, few inaccuracies in the movie 1804 by Tariq Nasheed. There's certain things people debate about. But one thing he was able to capture in 1804 was the use of the science, the use of how they got free from quote unquote the greatest war general, the little short guy, Napoleon, using exactly what you're talking about, you know, understanding what's around them and that spirituality within them. You know, if you know the right concoction, you give them a little bit of something on their tongue and they're gonna die. So, you know, but if you don't know that, you know, where they got that from, and you know, this guy is or this woman is a witch. That's the only. Even if you know about the Blair witch trials and what is the book that they used to have us read, the Salem Witch, and if you notice the book, they would have us read this book in high school. And Tituba, who was from the Caribbean, and she's practicing African spirituality, and these little white girls, they get around her, and because of this European version of, you know, whatever they're into, again, that is the devil, you know what I'm saying? And so, you know, they were hanging people all over the place because of that, because of anything that had to do with that. So, and we've ingested that as a people, and we don't know how to navigate in it once we get this this information. We don't know how to even have the discussion to explain to our people of what it is that we understand our people to be, and how it has carried us for thousands and thousands of years, and it's going to keep carrying us. And then the divisions become, you know, over this verse, and he didn't say this, and we're not even talking about that. We're just talking about how we've survived, how we've been able to survive for centuries and centuries, based off of our spiritual core. That's not going anywhere. Now, if I come and replace it and then tell you something else, then, you know, that's where the divisions are going to come in and have, because the thing is always there. It's always centered. It's always in the heart. It's always in the chakras. Always, it ain't going nowhere. But now, you any of this conversation that we're having, again, you know, I know way too many people that will say that's the reason why we are suffering. You know, that's the reason why Haiti had earthquakes. I heard somebody say that. Oh, they had earthquakes.
Oh my, I heard that so many times. I'm just like, are you kidding me, man? Are you kidding me now?
So, you know, so this is, you know, again, we're speaking to the choir, but it's part of what we deal with, and when we're trying to educate consciously without, you know, arguing and banter and stuff, and try to give the correct information or lead people to this information, and then let them, talk about certain things themselves, not to, reject what it is that they're dealing with. But if I'm not rejecting what you're dealing with, don't say our system of where we're coming from is the devil, and it's why we are in the situation we're in, and you're not understanding that the rapid fire gun plays a major role. I don't know if anybody saw the Brutes, the Brutes film that came out, HBO. There's germs, guns, germs, and steel, and then Exterminate the Brutes, which is a documentary that talks about all of these things of how and why we come into the situation that we're in. There's spirituality aspect, and then there's the Gatling gun that changes the dynamics of society and history. So, we can look at those aspects. And so I make the argument that it's the Gatling gun. I think everyone of sound mind, body, and spirit who understands what that was talks about the difference between knowing what, for example, Tecumseh, spiritual indigenous, I don't want to call it Indian, but he lined his people up and said he had a dream and they would survive, and then he pulled the Gatling gun out and took out the whole tribe. And so, that's the difference between what it is that we're doing here in Africa, in society, versus what we can become and what we're not in regards to spirituality, in regards to who we are. That Gatling gun is never talked about. It's only talked about in, white society and stuff like that. And again, it's not to disregard our spirituality and who we are, but that was a change in a lot of things. And, I'll let you continue, but, and I know we got to get ready to get up. I get ready to get something to eat myself, but that's something that's serious, that plays a role in who and what we are to this day and why we aren't practicing our systems and stuff like that.
Yes, so thank you, man. So, Brother Monkam, I guess you can close this because it's powerful. We have a lot to say, but hey, I don't realize it's already like almost 9. Wow, okay.
I mean, to be honest, it's been very informative. That was really, really good. Thank you very much. For providing us with all the knowledge and everything. Thanks, Brother Monte. You have some questions, and thanks for Sister Avantis. Happy Mother's Day to you, to your mom. I'm sure that your son took you somewhere nice today.
Yes.
So thank you, Mari, for being there, and thanks again, everyone. Let me see who's there again. So we got Adisa. So thanks again. Thanks for being around. And Brother Omowali, thank you very much again. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Brother Omowali is a very sharp brother. He's down in Atlanta.
More, man. I have events you didn't see. I mean, we want to, we can't just be talking. We want the women to be talking too. When we talk, we're gonna quiet. We're gonna all mute our mic and listen carefully to what you have to say.
Exactly.
You are all our mothers.
Okay.
Exactly.
You can be the host as well. You can take over the host as well if you want to. If you don't want to talk a lot, I didn't really talk a lot today. You can take over. You just listen and then you just, let people talk. If you want to do that, that's fun.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Right.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. Oh, she there.
So, Brother Monte, I know that you had a lot of questions for Dr. Gina Page. You want to look at the camera and then you can ask your question. I'm sure that brother going to be able to send that to her. If you can look at the camera and then you ask your question.
Oh, for the DNA thing?
Yes.
Oh, should I do it now or like?
You can look at the camera now and then do that. I'm going to call it. I'm going to edit the video and then I'm going to send it back to Professor. He's going to be able to send it. Or you want to do that? You want to do that on your own time and then you can send it. It's up to
No,
you.
I can do it quick now since it's let me do it quick. It's gonna be 1 minute, 2 minutes. I'll place I'm trying to make sure that I'm trying to do it quick, like straight to the point. Okay, are you ready? Can I do it? Okay,
Go ahead.
anytime.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, Professor. My name is Monte Chakunte. I do have a question regarding the DNA test. Just regarding the how accurate, the result are. So to be more fair, I'm going to use an example, a specific example, right? Between two people in Africa right now called the Igbo and the Bamileke. Now, looking at the context, the geographical context of those two people, they're separated by a border, by a line that was set there in 1885, we already know. So given that, since the Igbo and the Bamileke, you got so many studies and so many of our king who knows that we are the same people, we just divided. They might speak English and then we speak mainly French. Now, is there any data that you guys have to kind of show the difference DNA-wise between the Igbo and the Bamileke? If yes, where can we look it up? Thank you.
That's good.
That's perfect.
There you
go.
Yeah.
All right. So you finished, yeah?
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna say good night to everyone.
All right.
Again, thanks for your time, guys. Thanks again. Thanks a lot.
And Mom, I'm gonna call you.
Father, you're gonna okay. Anytime. So when just give me a call anytime.
Yeah, because of the visuals and the technical stuff, I'm gonna need some assistance at some point.
Okay. Okay, no problem at all. No problem. Just call me anytime. Anytime.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you guys. Thank you again.